Welcome to the Family Milk Cow podcast, where in every episode I cover topics that equip you with the skills and know-how to look after your girls in the barn. Family milk cows are more than just livestock. They are a part of our families. They deserve the best care possible from knowledgeable and responsible owners. So pull up a chair or your milk stool and let's dive into another episode of the Family Milk Cow podcast. Hello, everyone, and welcome to season 2 of the Family Milk Cow podcast. I'm so glad you're here, and I am so happy to be here. In today's episode, I'm going to be sharing my own story about how I got started with family milk cows. Towards the end of this second season and in future seasons, I'll be sharing stories from other small farmers and homesteaders, just so you can kind of get to know other people in our community. I think there is so much value just in hearing stories of people who are kind of doing similar things as ourselves. It's always wonderful to kind of build community even through the airwaves. But before I feel like I should be sharing the stories of other people, I felt like you might want to know, who is this person behind the mic? What is her background? Why is she talking to me? So I thought maybe starting with my own story would be a good place to begin. I did not grow up on a farm. I didn't come from a farm. We lived just outside of town, just maybe 5 minutes outside of a really small town, about 800 people. We did live a little bit in the woods, but we really weren't sort of outdoorsy type people. Both my parents, they both worked full-time jobs, did a little bit of camping, that sort of thing when we were kids, but we didn't do really anything with farming. We had a couple cats and we had a dog, no other pets beyond that. Kind of a small garden, some container gardening, that's about it. But I was a kid who always wanted to be out on a farm. That was the dream. I was kind of a weirdo. I remember being probably about 8 years old and playing old time general store where I'd pretend I was this pioneer traveling westward and I was trying to trade like wheat and stuff for wool and things like that. Those are the sort of games I played as a kid. So it really makes sense, I guess, that I am where I am today. Now, going along with that, I was, of course, a horse crazy kid. Most young girls have a horse phase they go through. Mine never really went away. I always had a love for horses and hope we have horses on our farm someday in the future. My mom, amazingly, she met somebody through her work who had recently taken over managing a local riding stable that had just started up. And so when I was in, I think, the 5th grade, I started taking the bus out there after school and working with horses. And I had zero experience with horses before this. Didn't even know how to put a halter on a horse. I love them in theory, but my had had absolutely zero practical skills up to that point. But going out there 3 days a week after school, my mom would just pick me up when she got off work. So I was out there for an hour and a half, sometimes 2 hours if she let me be out there a little extra. I was out there mucking out stalls, feeding animals, turning out horses. We did not have enough money to have a horse of my own. We didn't have money for riding lessons or that sort of thing. So I was kind of that kid in the barn who kind of watched other people's riding lessons and gleaned what I could. Some of the girls that didn't want to cool down their horses, I was the girl who was, yep, I would be happy to cool down your horse just so I can get some time in the saddle. And I did actually get quite a bit of time in the saddle. The folks that ran the stable, they raised Peruvian Pasafinos, which are a really beautiful gaited horse, and they just needed some saddle time for their young animals. I was young and fearless and rode lots of young horses that I honestly probably had no business riding, but they just wanted some saddle time on them, and I wanted some saddle time, so it worked out really well. Of course, where does this all come into play with milk cows? Obviously, horses have nothing to do with cows, but I found that this was really important in that it allowed for me to have an outlet where I still was able to kind of tap into that desire and that love of being outside, of working around animals, of working physically. I get so much satisfaction out of that. I did as a kid and I still do now as an adult. And another factor that I think is really important is when you're working with horses, especially from, I was 10 years old working with these huge animals, you really get used to being comfortable around animals bigger than yourself and how to move around them and how to be around them. My husband, he did not grow up with any sort of livestock either. His family, they are farmers in the Red River Valley. And so they do kind of corn and soy and all that kind of stuff. So he didn't grow up around big animals, whereas I was lucky enough to be put in the positions where I got to grow up around them. And I can definitely see the difference between how he moves and what his instincts are around them are so much different than my own. There's a lot more I could say about this time in my life. It was really magical in a lot of ways to have this opportunity. It ended up, long story short, that some folks at the barn, everyone was so incredibly kind to me there. And I'm still friends with some of the people who were adults to me then. And I'm now an adult with them. I'm still friends with them now to this day, which is really cool. It ended up that some folks there that I got to be friends with, they were picking up a couple of foals up at a PMU farm, which maybe this is incorrect. At the time, they told me stood for pregnant mare urine, where mares were kept and their urine is harvested and used for making medications and birth control pills and things. And so they have all these extra foals just kind of sitting around. So they brought back an extra one for me, basically, which was really incredible. So she was just this super muddy, wild little yearling. And they said, yeah, we just brought her back so you can do what you want with her, basically. She wasn't mine, but she was mine in the way that I got to just raise her myself, basically. Again, trying to make a long story short, I spent several years with my beautiful girl, Velvet. And then when I went to college, there was no way I could afford to bring her with me. And so she ended up going to a very lovely family where she still lives to this day. When I did eventually go to college, I wasn't sure what I wanted to go to school for. I knew and had known for a long time I wanted to work sort of in nonprofits. I wanted to work in some sort of field where I was helping people. And I was really, really confused about which direction to take that. There are just so many different areas that could use attention. I mean, my grandparents, they lived on a lake in a small little lake cabin. And so I grew up with a lot of love for the outdoors and nature. So I thought maybe I should work for the DNR. I also had a lot of love just for, my fellow man and thought, well, I, like gardening and growing things and being outside. Maybe I should work in community gardens in the inner city or something. I had no idea which direction I was going to go. It turned out at the end of the day that the answer to my question was actually farming and sustainable agriculture, growing things in a way that is not harmful to our water sources, that is respectful of animal life, that is respectful of farm workers, that keeps in mind soil health and soil quality. This was a huge thing that touches so many different aspects of life. And it also happened that it's the area that I was absolutely in love with. So it was so wonderful to kind of get awesome. This is the answer. I want to farm, and farming can be a way I can help people and help basically the entire world in my own little way. But as you know now, I had no farming background. I didn't know a hoe from a rake. I had no idea where to even begin, what sort of farming. Oh my goodness. So I found myself another school program to try. I ended up going to a town kind of in west central Minnesota called Fergus Falls, had this program called the Sustainable Food Production Program, and it only lasted 3 years, which is such a bummer because we could use it so much more. In this program, it was incredibly practical and hands-on. One of our teachers, it was all about pasture management and grass and fencing and grazing. That was what he taught us. So we went out and put up high tensile fencing. We put up woven wire fencing. We put up all sorts of different fence. We learned how to drive tractors. We learned how to identify different forages. We learned how to manage pasture appropriately via rotational grazing or management intensive grazing. We learned all that kind of wonderful stuff. In addition to that, two of our professors as well in the program, one was a veterinarian, the other, she's sort of an expert goat woman and just kind of small farmer in general. So we learned fermentation. We learned all sorts of important veterinary topics as well. I remember one day they took us out and butchered a goat, and as part of our class, we looked at the different parts of the rumen, and so it was just incredibly hands-on and such a valuable program. Another wonderful part of that program is that we also got to visit all sorts of different small scale food operations and farms in the area. We went to a vinegarie, we went to a pastured pork operation, we went to a organic dairy farm, all sorts of different places. And it was wonderful in opening my eyes to all the different possibilities that being involved in local agriculture could have for me. After I finished that program, there's a little bit of bouncing around. I'm still in my early 20s at this point in the story, and I did some other work for a little while. I worked in some community gardens, I did, and then I also worked in the AmeriCorps, and I served with Habitat for Humanity for a year, which was really wonderful. As part of kind of that bouncing around, I ended up working at one of my professors in the program at his dairy farm. It was our fencing instructor. He had a small scale grass-based dairy, diversified, so they also had hogs on pasture and pastured poultry as well. We moved around like in a big wagon out on pasture. So it was there that I got experience working on a milk line. They had a New Zealand pit style parlor where we milked the girls. At the time, they had a pretty small herd that they were milking, just because he did a lot of work off farm, presenting and teaching and things like that. So his wife had to manage a lot of it. So I helped with that. So that was wonderful. I spent a whole summer working out there on his grass-based dairy farm. And funny enough, after working at the dairy farm, I had thought, I just don't think dairy farming's for me. I don't think dairy cows are necessarily for me. Now, they did things very holistically, very respectfully there, but it was still kind of the traditional dairy setup where you're milking AM and PM, where the calves are taken off their moms within 24 hours. And for me, that just didn't work right. There was just those are the kind of the two big things that are really a struggle for me, especially as a young person trying to live a little bit of a social life. And that's of course no judgment against that sort of daring. If that's what works for you and works for your life, that's fabulous. But for me, it didn't quite click. And then at the end of the day, I really liked the area where I had lived, where I'd gone to school, and one of my professors in the program who had an organic vegetable farm needed some help for the summer. I packed up my bags and moved into a very, very rustic cabin. It's a lot better now, but at the time it was pretty sketchy. A very rustic cabin on his farm. I got a full-time off-farm job. I worked as a children's librarian for 2 years. And during that time, so I go into work as a librarian, I come home, I change into my other work clothes, and I go out straight into the fields and work on the organic vegetable farm. So I put in a ton of hours, but man, it was wonderful. Probably one of the happiest times I can think of in my whole life. Partway through my time there, I got a new job working for the University of Minnesota Extension, and there I was coordinating the 4-H program for our county. And that was a lot of fun running that program. I got to do all sorts of stuff, incubating chicks with kids and managing county fair stuff, which is also wonderful and a bit of a nightmare. If you are a 4-H'er, you know exactly what I'm talking about. I also was in charge of managing our county's Master Gardener program and actually became a Master Gardener myself. So, again, just a really wonderful kind of blossoming time for me. When I was on the organic vegetable farm, they decided they wanted to get a milk cow for their family. Now, I love these people and respect them more than anybody else. Their family, they were the husband, he was one of my groomsmen, or he was one of my bridesmen. He stood up with my bridesmaids on my side. His wife played the violin. They're as close as family can possibly be. So I have a ton of respect for them. But I need to say this, and they would agree. They're terrible at animal management. They are vegetable farmers. They are not livestock people. Even still, they got a milk cow and we milked the cow. Usually two of us will go down to do milking in the morning just to make it go a lot faster when we were hand milking. Eventually, we did get a milk machine out there and then we're milking via machine. And eventually, they were just kind of tired of the milk cow thing. So I sort of ended up taking over the whole milk cow operations. Now, that cow is a very important cow because her name was Bee and she was the nicest cow you could possibly ever want to meet. I fell in love with her head over heels. She was so, so sweet. I'll share a picture of her over on Instagram. Make sure you check that out. Bee was a Jersey. She was 4 years old. And her calf that she had, a heifer, the only calf she had with us, is Juneberry, who is the mother of all the cows that we have had. Well, not all the cows. Mother or grandmother of all the cows we've had on our farm. She is my ride or die. If you can have a cow be a ride or die. And so that is where Juneberry came from. And so Bee, of course, is very important and a wonderful cow in my life. And she was really the cow that made me fall in love with having cows, fall in love with the whole dairying process. If I hadn't had her, I don't know I'd be here where I am today. Unfortunately, Bee got, we believe, hardware disease, and she died when she was only 4. So Juneberry, I think, was about 6, 7 months old when she passed away. Now, during all this, while I am living at an organic vegetable farm, working full time for 4-H, and then also just kind of doing my own things that interested me at the time. I had a little botanical business making balms and salves, that kind of thing, using all the wonderful milk from the milk cow, doing rotational grazing out on their pasture. I then met my husband through work. He was actually my district director. It was a little bit sketchy at first, especially because he was way more certain about things than I was from the get-go. So he was ready to call HR and tell everybody. And I'm like, wait, maybe we should just see how this rides out at first. But we are still here together 9 years later, which seems absolutely insane with 3 little kids. So he must have been right about something. After I met my husband and we got engaged, of course, I wasn't about to keep living out on a farm there by myself. So my husband and I found our little 5-acre piece of heaven out here. And now this is where we have our own cows. I have had cows consistently in my life then for, 11 years. And then prior to that, I had that experience of working a summer on the grass-based, organic, not officially organic, but still organic dairy farm. That brings us up to today and my plans for the future with our cows. The dream has always kind of been to have my own little small milking herd and have a little on-farm creamery. Whether or not that's the direction I go with our milk cows, I honestly have no idea. Everything changes so much when you have kids and just trying to think what I can reasonably actually do in terms of time and energy and everything else. I love the idea and really want to be in a place where I'm providing a consistent quality agricultural product to my community. Right now, my kids are 1, 3, and 5, and it is very difficult to find time even to sit down and record this podcast, let alone run a small creamery. So that means for right now and the near future, we're just doing the family milk cow thing. We have Juneberry, who turns 9 this spring, and then we have her heifer from last year, Bluebird, who we also call Birdie, and I'm hoping to keep Birdie sort of as a replacement heifer. But I have also said that with every other heifer that Juneberry has ever had. It's really hard these days when you can sell your milk cow for about $2,000. That's a lot of money and kind of tempting, as you're getting towards the end of the summer. Well, do we want to feed another cow or do we want to sell her? Ideally, though, I'll keep these girls and keep working on managing milk cows in addition to every other part of my life, because they are something that are so important to me and dear to me. And honestly, at this point with Juneberry, even if I had to not milk ever again, I'd probably just keep her and have a fat, sassy friend out to, just a pasture ornament. She's not going anywhere. I appreciate you listening to this first episode of season 2. In our upcoming episodes, we're going to be talking about hand milking versus machine milking. We're going to be talking about lice. We're going to be talking about all sorts of important topics you don't want to miss. So make sure you subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you so much for listening to another episode of the Family Milk Cow Podcast. You can become a part of the Family Milk Cow Podcast by joining the Milkmaid Brigade, sponsoring an episode, or following along on social media. You can find links for all these and more, including show notes, at familymilkcowpodcast.com. If you love what you're hearing, please rate, review, subscribe, and turn on those automatic downloads. One of the best ways to support this show is simply by sharing it. And as always, make sure to give your girl down in the barn a good scratch behind the ears from me.